people ask, I'll be honest, people ask me, why did you decide to move to Puerto Rico? And I said, this is mi patria. It's my homeland. And I turned 78 in October, and I realized I'll be 25 years in freedom. And I made a choice in life to fight for the freedom of what I believe in, my nation, Puerto Rico.
Saludos and welcome to the Rematriating Boriken podcast, where we discuss the journey to the essence of these islands, this archipelago and her surrounding waters, the restoration of our essence before conquests and continued colonialism, the reclamation of our collective healing and liberation. I am Yasmin Hernandez, creator of Cucubanación, artist, writer, activist, born and raised in Brooklyn, Rematriating Boriken. I got really excited about the idea of doing a monthly spotlight on the different people that I interviewed for the Rematriation Portraits series. And I went into my calendar and wrote up a plan of who I'd like to feature for what month. As my brother used to say, God don't like plans. This was not the spotlight that I intended, certainly not in this way. My dear friend, mentor, heroine, freedom fighter, mother, daughter, abuela, writer, poet, artist, artesana, producer, badass, goddess, revolutionary, tantas cosas, Dylcia Pagán Rivera, who was a political prisoner for fighting for the freedom of Puerto Rico from 1980 until 1999. Dylcia Pagán, as of June 30th, 2024, is a beloved ancestor. Many of us are in shock because someone with so much life force, so much vitality, who had such immense presence, who loved abundantly, who expressed herself unfiltered. It is unfathomable that all of that life could be here one minute and not be here the next. We have the new moon, and we have a new ancestor. While we grieve and we feel sadness for what was lost, we also welcome this new state. When a loved one becomes an ancestor, we meditate on the legacies, the lessons of that life, and how we can incorporate these into our own journey, as we were already touched by that journey. So this is for all the folks meditating on the transition of Dylcia Pagán, and for folks who do not know or did not know personally Dylcia Pagán, to know a little about who she was and the magnitude of her journey. I have pieced together some of her interview that I recorded the first week of March of this year, 2024. I drove to her house, stayed over. We sat to break bread and eat. And then as night set in and the cookies began to sing, we recorded this conversation that I had asked would be about rematriation and the collective decision that she made with her comrades to come live in Puerto Rico upon their release from prison. And when she started the interview, she started at the time of her birth, went through her childhood in El Barrio, East Harlem. And last week, me llegó un aviso de que quizá iba a haber una transición. And at that moment, I realized that, as she said throughout the interview, I got to tell the story. I realized that perhaps her need to tell her whole story was because there was an inherent sense, subconscious sense, that the story would be coming to a close. And so I spent this day, since hearing the news, listening to her voice, which was very soothing, listening to her words, playing back messages of hers, and cutting this and editing this in a way that I can share with other folks the contents of that conversation. Y con eso les dejo con las reflexiones de nuestra matriota Dylcia.
My name is Dylcia Pagán Rivera because, Puerto Ricans have two names. So we carry our father's name and our mother's last name. I was born in the controversy Lincoln Hospital. My wonderful mother, Dylcia Pagán Rivera, was in coma 28 hours. I have to tell the story because she used to always tell people, tell them what happened to you. She was in a coma to bring me to this world, and my father was studying to be a plumber anyway at the Navy Yard, yes. And he received a telegram telling him that if he wanted to see his wife alive, he had to come immediately to the hospital. So my father said he took a cab, got to Lincoln Hospital, and my mother was in this room where she has, I guess it must be like a glass partition. And she told me the story that she saw my father, said, Chan, my father's name was Sebastian. Chan, ven pa acá. Come here, Chan. And she saw my father, and then she went into a coma. And the priest came to give her extreme unction. And my mother was something else. She told me that she heard the priest, and he happened to be at that time, no? It was 1946, so most of the priests were all Irish in all the Puerto Rican communities. He told my mother, y ahora llevaste este mundo sin pecado ninguno. And he went like this, and my mother said, what the fuck? What the fuck? You think I'm going to die? I was born 20 minutes later. So I came, my mother promised a promesa, which at that time, we did, all the kids in East Charlem. I lived in El Barrio. From the Bronx, I went to live in El Barrio, East Charlem. El Barrio, which is really my community. And all the kids, parents would make all these promises, religious debts that they owed to saints. They would dress them in these archaic gowns with these crochet balls that would hang out. And I remember my mother told me, I made a promesa to la Virgen de, I said, to who? The Immaculate Conception. I was 13 when I was told that, informed about that. I said, I am not wearing no blue outfit, walking all over El Barrio. So then my mother went to church, and the priest charged my parents, I think, $500 to have a novena to get, isn't that weird? To get a promesa off my back. And here I am. My father came from Yauco, Puerto Rico. He left Puerto Rico at the age of 17. My mother went to Hunter High School and Hunter College. She was studying mathematics, but she never really worked. And my father was a plumber and a member of the Nationalist Party. He was a cadet of Don Pedro Albizu Campo from Yauco. And when he went to New York, Elena Valentin found my father and found out that he was a nationalist. So he worked with the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party in New York City. So since I was very, very little, my father used to sit me in his lap with a leather portfolio with Don Pedro Albizu Campos speeches, and he would read them to me. And one of the things he always told me is that Don Pedro Albizu Campos was the most important person in Puerto Rican history because he sacrificed his life for the freedom of our country. I never forgotten that. And I'm a privileged young woman, yes. Now I'm a little older, but I have a young spirit. Anyway, I went to Catholic school by accident because the school wouldn't take me because I was not what a 6.9 on my birthday is October 15th. Some bureaucratic nonsense. So my mother took me to St. Cecilia's, and the nun sister Rosella asked me who I was, and I told her my name was Dylcia Pagán Rivera, that I was Puerto Rican, and I could read and write, and I knew mathematics. And the nun looked at me. I had just come from my grandfather's funeral in Guanica, Puerto Rico. My grandfather was a Puerto Rican bodeguero. He was called a businessman. Really, he had like 11 to 17, something like that, bodegas between East Harlem and Harlem, and was very well known in Guanica. We used to call him El Soldado, and he brought the first black Packard to Puerto Rico. And my mother used to come with my grandfather all the summers in the boat to come to Puerto Rico because I guess he did business. I don't know. I met my grandfather when I was 5, and he passed away when I was 5.5. So my first visit to Puerto Rico was for my grandfather's funeral, and it was like big fanfare. St. Cecilia's took me, and because I was on TV, my mother felt that first thing she told me is, remember the nuns are not gods. If you feel like you always have to talk your mind and you have a question, you ask questions. Now, Dylcia Pagán Rivera. When she gave me that long name, I said, oh, here comes a lecture. What? She said, Mira, you have to be, you're a very talkative little girl. And you're going to a Catholic school. So just keep your mouth shut for a couple, okay? And don't answer nothing. If the nun asks you a question, then you raise your hand and you answer. Is that okay? Well, yeah, I said, all right. By my third day at dinner, I told my parents, look, Sister Thomasina thinks I don't speak English. She said, but what? You told me not to talk. So my mother said, okay, then when you go to school tomorrow, after to go to school for 8 years and have to go to mass every day was like penance for if you sinned. And I never sinned because children do not count. Can you sin as a child? Anyway, to make a long story short, I also had a little girl who used to put pins into my hand. I don't know why. And my mother said, look, if she dares put that, tu cogerle puño y le metes una bofetada, that's all. Don't you be a little chump in school because they're in Catholic school. I said, okay. So the next day, she put her pin. She used to put like bobby pins into my arm. I got up and I slapped her. And Sister Thomasina said, oh my goodness, what are you doing? And I said, first of all, my mother told me to tell you that I speak English and Spanish. And John Medina here keeps translating everything to me from English to Spanish. And the nun looked at me, she said, oh my goodness, you speak English? I said, yes. I know you think I only speak Spanish because I came from Puerto Rico for my grandfather's funeral, okay? And I became the official translator of my class. Believe me, in that 1952, there weren't a lot of Puerto Rican kids going to St. Cecilia's, which was on the white part of East Harlem, the barrio. It was between 3rd and 2nd. Even though the church was between Lexington and Park, the school was between 3rd and 2nd Avenue. Most of the kids were Italian, Irish, and a couple of black kids. So we had a couple. We had David Mafuz, Moses Buriel, Raymond Rodriguez, and maybe 4 little girls. So the nuns were very racist, and my mother decided that she would become a substitute teacher to ensure that the nuns would not humiliate me. Living in East Harlem, I lived in a private little house in the middle of the 10th and Madison Avenue, and had a bell. And it was my mother and father and I on the 3rd floor. And then Mr. and Mrs. Galloway was a black couple, and they had a husky dog. He was the only black electrician of El Barrio. So Miss Annie Galloway and Mr. Galloway, my mother and father and myself. I got my own playroom. My parents had these parties, and everybody in the barrio that got married had the wedding in my house. And my parents would literally take apart their bedroom and put all the stuff. I loved it. They would take all the mattresses and put them either in my playroom or in my bedroom. And we decorate and have all these parties, my birthday party included. So it was like a wonderful affair. And for Christmas, we celebrated, I had to do Christmas because the Children's Hour on NBC and Gimbals used to provide us with the toys. So I kind of believed in Santa Claus a little bit. And my parents sent me like a telegram from Santa Claus. So I used to tell the kids, well, I got a telegram from Santa Claus. I guess he exists. Make a long story short, I really didn't believe in Santa Claus. But that was it. All we had was the Three Kings. And that was, the Planeros would come and perform. Let's see, I've had a good life. I mean, my parents gave me privileges that most of the children in my community didn't have. And I was taught that El Barrio would belong to us. And my world in life was to make El Barrio a better place to live. This is my favorite story of why I know it's important to be a Puerto Rican woman and why I now live in my nation. When I was almost 6, the producer of the Children's Hour called on a Saturday and she said, Dylcia, do you think you can learn a script the next Sunday? I said, of course. So we had a man that used to wear a dog's costume and he was called Maribel the Talking Dog. And the young girl that was his playmate was sick. She was quite ill. She never came back to the show. So Aunt Alice had asked my dancing teacher. I started on the show as a dancer with the Butler School of Dance. Then Aunt Alice wanted the Butlerettes. So I got to sing with 5 of my friends. And then she said, would you like to be Maribel's playmate? And I said, oh, I like that. We got to be Maribel's friends. And at dinner, my father said, what's the matter? What did Aunt Alice want? My mother said, tell her. So I told my father the story. And my mother said, okay. And my father said, do you want to do it? I said, yes. Because what did your mother just tell you before? It doesn't make you better than anybody else. Then my mother interrupted and said, but the one thing you're going to learn from this day forward is all those kids, you used to be a dancer and you were part of the school and there was people, there was some little black girls and there was some Puerto Rican kids, not much. But now you're going to be all with white kids. My father said, you have your language, you have your music, you have our dancing, and you have the struggle. And I've never, ever forgotten that. When the TV went color, and they didn't have makeup to match my skin color, so they literally had to make something so I could do the first Children's Hour piece with Dougie Simmons. And every week it had a different theme. So I learned that being Puerto Rican was like really cool. And it was important that I was proud of being Puerto Rican. And I'm blessed that I had parents that made me feel and encouraged. See, at that time in East Harlem, in El Barrio, Puerto Ricans first really came to South Brooklyn. But then they all moved to East Harlem. So from 96 to 125th Street, there were Puerto Ricans everywhere. And, we're very, very territorial. So the ones from Jauco lived on 8th Street. The ones from Guanica. My father became the vice president, no, the sergeant of arms of Pops of the Children's Hour. And one Mother's Day, my mother accidentally burned a leg. So my father got to be on the Children's Hour with me, with Ed Hurley, the host, and his daughter, and we sang from The King and I, Shall We Dance? It was wonderful. My father was a first tenor. And whenever we went to we had these at the Hotel Piccadilly, we had an annual gala. And it was just wonderful to see my parents, my father getting all decked out, Nobody drove. So my father would get a friend and they'd bring their car and they'd take us to the place where the Hotel Piccadilly, which was on 48th Street between Broadway and I think, 8th Avenue, somewhere. Fancy little place. But to see my dad be proud of who he is and was, and they would say, Charlie, my father would say, no, my name is, you can call me John or Sebastian, because white folks don't know that we call ourselves, we all have nicknames, but that part of me, my father's name was called Bachan, because his name was Sebastian. So he would have to tell them, no, call me John, it's okay, I'm not Charlie. And I know stories about my dad being in the service and really having to overcome racism with in the army. He was in the Philippines and he was a scouter, and he would take the food rations and go up the hill and give the food to the people that lived of the Philippines so they could have food to eat. But as a scouter, they would let him know when the attacks would be happening so he could move his people into safety. And I think that comes from being a survivor. My father was a survivor. He was this kid from Yauco, Puerto Rico. He left Yauco at 17 years of age. It is said that he left his house with electricity that he installed and water. And he was a very self-educated man. He loved the classics, and he taught me about Victor Hugo and all the classics of. I loved him when he would read Shakespeare because he had his accent. But he would get into his Shakespeare and Greek mythology. So I think that also gave me the license to learn about the world around me, but also to honor my essence of being a young Puerto Rican child. And one of the things my father always told me, you always have to learn what your enemy is doing. So don't ever think they're not better than you are. You remember what I always told you? And my mother would tell me you have to challenge. No matter where you work, you will never be anybody's secretary. You will never be anybody's assistant. You're going to run a place. And she was advanced because the women at that time didn't have that mentality really. She was an advanced woman. And she always used to tell me, you will never, ever take orders from anyone. Absolutely not. And I thank her daily. I thank you for giving me that essence of an independent woman. And my father for giving me, honoring who I am as a person. And my mother too. Because, I remember being on the bus, on the Madison Avenue bus. And this woman, we were coming from my dancing school, which was on 86th Street. We would take the crosstown and then Madison Avenue. And this white woman in a mink coat got in the bus. And she told my mother, excuse me, listen, can you tell your daughter to get up and give me your seat? I must have been maybe 8 years old. And Mother said, excuse me? And I said, Mother said, don't you dare get up. She says, what is it? You saw my Puerto Rican face and you thought you could tell me what to do with my child? And she said, and by the way you're dressed, you should really have a chauffeur take you around and get on a public bus. And everybody applauded in the bus. The next person that came on that bus was a black lady, an elderly lady. And my mother said, Dylcia, get up, give this lady your chair. And everybody looked at her. Mama said, she deserves the chair, not you. And I think it wasn't that subtlety of making everyone around you understand that people of color were just as good as they are. And at that time you're talking about the 60s, late 50s, 60s. racism was alive and well. And I thank my parents for showing me the divisions between people in life and society and class. And I must say, yeah, you're not better than anybody, but what you have to learn that what you have to learn to share. And that's part of my way of being. I think all my life I've learned that no matter what I did for a living, I had a responsibility to my people and to my community. And in organizing, we found out that Puerto Rican independence movement was doing work on the nation, on the island of Culebra that was invaded. It was taken over by the United States Navy. And that was the first demonstration that we had. My mother participated in it. My father did also, about getting the U.S. Navy out of Culebra. And it was very awakening to see how people really got involved. And the whole question that Don Pedro was always talked about. No matter where you went in El Barrio, Don Pedro was the national hero. And the Nationalist Party, Elena Valentin and many of my father's friends, they were all members of the Nationalist Party. But then we had the gag law in Puerto Rico, and it also was in New York. So in order for the Nationalists to meet, they all became Masons. And the Masons enabled the Puerto Rican Independence Party to have their Puerto Rican Nationalist meeting. And my father was a Mason and a member of the Nationalist Party. I know that my father passed when I was 15. And my mother passed before I turned 21. But I am so blessed to have been raised by two people that allowed me to be myself and to be very early in my life proud to be Puerto Rican. My father spoke English with an accent, but it was so beautiful. East Harlem was making the city jump because we had this community consciousness of who we were. But I think being raised in El Barrio and being involved in all that so-called change, which we knew was limited, but we made El Barrio be the in place. Our friends owned a bar, it was called Christopher's. It is there where we negotiate. We brought the president of all the networks. We sued the networks because there were no TV programming. And the wives would call and say, hey, Dylcia, who's performing? We had a second floor. Willie Colon would come and perform. Cheo from Joe Cuba would come, And we had a kitchen, and it was like the in place. White folks had Studio 54. We had Christopher's. And everybody came to hang out at Christopher's. I went to St. Cecilia's, and then went to Cathedral High School. And I decided that I wanted to work in the community, and they had just started the anti-poverty programs. East Harlem was divided into 10 community areas. And I was hired I wasn't even 18 as one of the first community organizers. And we were called community stimulators. It's so funny. To define the necessities of the everyday life of that community. It was an experience. It was the first anti-poverty program in East Harlem was called MEND, Massive Economic Neighborhood Development. And it was maximum, quote, feasible participation of the poor. And if people understand that Kennedy created that whole question of the anti-poverty program, but that's how I became political, because I saw the reality. While being a community organizer, I went to visit the community and found people had living conditions that I had. A lot of people didn't have that. And I became a housing organizer with Bob De Leon, who's now joined his ancestors. We created 107th, 108th, and 109th was owned by one landlord. And what we did was we organized building by building, and we got the landlord, we took him to court, and we created the first community co-op, housing co-op in El Barrio. We did all kinds of youth programs, and we did Christmas parties, but with Puerto Rican music, because that was our community. And we were able to struggle because in the Loíza we had John Flores, Julio Flores, who started the whole issue. This was now the 60s, right? Issue of bilingual education. So I got involved in doing that. I got involved in doing housing organizing. We did community concerts. We did fiestas patronales, which was never heard of in El Barrio, because that's what we do in Puerto Rico. Every town has a patron saint, and that's like a big excuse to have this extravaganza of parties and community concerts and bailing, and people come to perform, and it's a jam session. And every town in Puerto Rico has a big jam session. It's called fiestas patronales. But what happened was, I then went to become an evaluator of the anti-poverty program. And that's where my mind, I saw the contradictions of the society I was living. I was then about 19 years old. And I worked with this Polish gentleman who was a social worker. And I said, okay, Joe, what are we going to do? How do we evaluate that and the whole thing of maximum fees of participation of the poor? And since he was a social worker, there's a whole concept about how social workers define the work that they do with their clients and who they're serving. So what we did was, in our evaluation, we evaluated the anti-poverty programs throughout all the city of New York. His name was Joe Holden, brilliant man. And what we found out is that maximum fiscal participation of the poor was not occurring. What had happened, the anti-poverty program had created an underline of dependency in the community. They had new community leaders, but they weren't allowed to do what they wanted to do. They had to do what the government said they had to do. So that we weren't seeing our communities really being ruled and run by our people. And some people believed that they were, but most everybody saw the reality. And in that process, there was also at that time a movement of consciousness about the issue of Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is the oldest colony in the Western Hemisphere. We created the East Harlem Education and Action Council. And we got community leaders, artists, all genres, painters, writers, advertisers, playwrights, some published, some non-published, poets, and activists. And we learned from the Black community that they sold the network. So that's what we did. But they didn't do anything. So we had a meeting. Jorge Soto, there's a picture of him right on my wall, one of our top painters. He's joined the Ancestors, an incredible artist. He tells me, Dylcia, why don't we have a demonstration? And I said, well, that's not a bad idea. And then somebody else said, why don't we take over the WNET as a telethon? Well, let's take over the telethon. So guess who walked in? Peary Thomas, Humberto Cintrón, Frank Espada, Julio Rodriguez, that was the only woman. We took over the telethon at WNET. And then Peary was wonderful. He said, Punto! and he read his statement. And J, what's his name? The president of the WNT looked at us and he said, well, we got $1.2 million and we got funded for the first television series in the history of the United States of America titled Realidades. And what did we do? We created a tie between the Puerto Rican reality in the United States and the Puerto Rican reality in Puerto Rico. And we took issues. By then it was the issue of Vieques. We had the issues of, the Vieques was a big issue then. There was like the music of Puerto Rico, our traditional music. I did the opening show. I invited 800 people on the set at WNET. And we did from Puerto Rican classical dances to salsa. And I had Willie Colon and Hector Lavoz, who were just the hottest salsa players, performed with the bands. Machito and his sister Graciela, Cuban but salsero, big band sign. My pleneros from my block on 110th Street, playing our typical Puerto Rican African music. And I hired what we call like the traveling Puerto Rican symphony. So the director was Gonzalez to do a Puerto Rican danza because that was my father's favorite piece. And then we had Ray Barreto with his band. You can't ask for anything more. They didn't know what to do. And we had food, 850 people, and we jammed from 6 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning on the set. Everybody at NET said, what the hell is going on? We created history. And you know what? I know. We didn't realize that we were creating history. Because we talked about every issue that was important to Puerto Ricans in the United States and in Puerto Rico. And there was no division between us. It was about, this is important here on the island, and look what's happening in New York City. People ask, I'll be honest, people ask me, why did you decide to move to Puerto Rico? And I said, this is mi patria. It's my homeland. And I turned 78 in October, and I realized I'll be 25 years in freedom. And I made a choice in life to fight for the freedom of what I believe in, my nation, Puerto Rico. And we live in two worlds. And I believe that the whole question of the mentality of why we're colonized is because we live in two worlds. We have U.S. propaganda showing the diamonds and the worlds and the hot stuff, and the reality of Puerto Rico, which is a paradise invaded. Doing what I call my revolutionary sabbatical. I was incarcerated for almost 20 years. And then I did 6 years on parole. It really sort of stopped my life, but I didn't let it happen. Why do I give up my child and my career? And I didn't give up my child. My child, our Puerto Rican national poet laureate, took my son, who was 13 months when I was captured, to an incredible family in Chihuahua, Mexico. And I didn't see my son for 10 years. And then he appeared for Christmas. It's the best Christmas gift I've ever gotten. My son will be 45 March 16th. And I'm blessed to have this incredible Mexican socialist family that raised my child. My child told me one day in prison, I know that I'm Puerto Rican, but I'm also Mexican. And I said, absolutely, he's a Mexican. What do you want? Give me a kiss. Mommy kiss. Give mommy a kiss. Give mommy a kiss. Okay. What? I do me also. You're so cute. Well, my dad told me you have to know who your enemy is. And people get upset. U.S. imperialism is the enemy right now in Palestine. Let's be real. And it's really, people don't want to admit, Puerto Rico will never be a state of the United States of America. Puerto Rico is, we are a nation that has resisted U.S. imperialism for over 140 years. One day, our nation will be free. Why do I give up my career? Because I believe in the freedom of my country. I knew. My gut level was, I became a member of the FALN, the Armed Forces for National Liberation. And that, I got captured April 4th, 1980 at 2:20 p.m. And I have no regrets in life. Because when one decides to fight for freedom, two things can happen to you. You get busted, arrested, or you get killed. We didn't get killed, we got busted. And I was to Illinois. And when the judge, well, I love you, sentenced us, he said, on these, people were praying. We got arrested April 4th, 1980. And then the judge said, when all good Jews and Christians were celebrating the holy time, these 11 Puerto Rican terrorists. And it's interesting that they charged us with seditious conspiracy, which is Part D of the law of treason. And every Puerto Rican that has fought for the freedom of my country, our country, that's exactly what they've been charged with. And guess what? The people that charged into the United States Congress January 6th, which is our Christmas, our three kings, by orders of a president, were charged. And you know what they were sentenced? 2 years on probation. We were sentenced from 55 to 103 years. Tell me that that's not a big contradiction. We live in two worlds. We're a colony. And you know what? Puerto Ricans here are enthusiastically left after Maria. And you know what? 300,000 are in the United States. And there's like 150,000 that have returned. And Puerto Ricans in the United States left the island young. My father left it at 17. He never came back. But he taught me what the importance of struggle and the freedom of my country is and will always be. People don't understand that because they don't understand what commitment to struggle is really about. And I want my legacy to be that I am a freedom fighter, a smart woman, an intelligent woman, an artist. And my granddaughter was talking to her friend Thanksgiving evening after eating, and she's the little one, she's 10. Elena Isabel, and she told her friend, I'm at my Abby Dylcia's house. And she showed with her cell, her mother's cell, look, you see all this art? Yes. My Abby Dylcia is a poet, a writer. She makes films, she does television, and you know what? She's a Puerto Rican patriot. She's 10 years old. So my son and Tanya taught them correctly. We have two freedom fighters in prison, a Native American, Leonard Peltier, and our new African brother, whom we have honored to say I spoke with him about 4 months ago on a phone. I have no regrets in life. You know why? Because when you really believe in yourself and you believe in your essence of who you are, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's so important that young people get to know their essence. I know that one day my nation will be a free and socialist land. Like it or not, that's how it's going to be. I may not see it in my lifetime, but I know my granddaughters will. I think that's important. I just did a conference with 400 women, former incarcerated women and girls. We had a weekend of healing, and I was the keynote speaker. And I got to share with women that I spent a lot of time with, women that became my sisters, and women that made me laugh because I taught aerobics, I taught theater, I did a lot of stuff in prison. And it was such a joy to see my sisters hug and kiss me. And one of them told me, listen, girl, my grandson, you made him a ceramic whistle with a Puerto Rican coquí in it. And I said, oh my God, Gail, yes, the little boy. I also, because I couldn't see my son, I organized the Children's Center at FCI Dublin. And the woman that came was there, who was my legal advisor, came to the conference. So I got to spend time with Ellen Berry and many of the women. And it was joy. It was a time of joy. The organizer, the head of the organization, Andrea, is an ex-prisoner. She's an incredible human being. And she got all these women together. And it's a national and international organization that was probably one of the best birthday gifts I've ever had. And to see where my sisters are today and to be able to hug and honor them and share stories, and we laugh about all the stuff that you do. And let me tell you, folks, women in prisons are mothers. We run to survive, you know. We couldn't have makeup. I took the pastel paints and we made eyeshadow. The magic markers, we made eyeliners. And then we had the t-shirts that many of the young people were wearing, the t-shirt strips. That came from prison. We created our own styles and we survived. And being with the U.S. Council with Andrea James and all the sisters and her staff was unbelievable 5 days that I got to see and hug and kiss the women I shared my time with. So if you're prepared to struggle, be prepared to win, because that's winning. It was very difficult, I think, for people to accept 11 of us coming to move here to Puerto Rico. And now we're part of our nation. And they realize that it doesn't matter where you have to born because of the situation of being a colony. When we were offered our freedom, it was like let's make a deal on television. The staff, the correctional staff in the visitor would say, Pagan. And I said, there's no deals to be made. We had 10 days of phone calls between all of my co-defendants. And it's in those 10 days of phone calls where we decided we would come to our nation, to Puerto Rico. Because, what we're about was fighting for the freedom of our country. And we wanted to be, all of us, return back to Puerto Rico. And it's interesting that we came back to the nation and we find moments to see each other, to celebrate the birth of our children and the birth of our grandchildren. And it's like, I get to visit with all of my friends from New York. I get to visit with their children and their granddaughters, grandchildren. My friend Panama, who used to be a young lord's grandson, asked his mother, who now lives here, Marie Nieves, Mommy, why do I call everybody Titi? And Marie looked at her and he said, because you're Puerto Rican. And for me, it's a joy to see little girls who are now grown women, and I get to hang out with them and their children. I keep in touch with many of my comrades children. Mickey Melendez's granddaughter is 20, and Edie Savala's granddaughter were here. We went shopping together. We had a group. And since I have COPD, I get to use the little cart, and I don't drive. So it's like a fiasco. Dylcia, everybody knows who I am in my community. And oh, there she is. Watch it. She doesn't knock the bottles down, which I don't do. But that's a joy. And the joy of life is hearing their stories. And I get to share lives with all the little girls that are now grown women. It's a gift of struggle. And the sister who's here, I get to hang out with her sons. Yes. And it's a celebration of struggle. And when I look back now, 20 years in Puerto Rico, do I miss New York? I have COPD. I can't be going to New York in the crazy weather, and I'm not going to do it. I miss sometimes all my crazy friends, and most of them come here to see me. I don't think I missed where I used to hang out. Well, then I tell everybody, then come here and let's hang out here. And I'll take you to eat seafood by the beach in the sun instead of eating on 116th Street at Capuchias. Here you get it fresh and off the grill. So it's like I'm living a good life. It's quieter. Yes, sometimes we're getting hurricanes. But you know what? I'm living my culture. I'm living my essence. I'm living what I fought for. And what not just me. We have 6 generations of Puerto Ricans that gave up, men and women who gave up their lives. And in the 50s, people got killed. The Ponce Massacre for fighting for the freedom of our country. We pay a big price for freedom, and sometimes people don't realize that. But you know what? At the very end, it's all worth it. Hopefully, like my granddaughter said, one day Puerto Rico's va a ser libre. I have 2, 13, Paula Sofia, and 10-year-old Elena Isabel. 2 sharp young ladies that are going to be something else. And so are all my friends' children. Because their parents have brought them here, and they're getting to know what Puerto Rico's about. And it's not what you see on the TV. It's not what you don't live in the ocean flying around. It's a whole dichotomy of capitalism, because right now our people are going through a very difficult period in Puerto Rico. Many people have asked, how could you give up your career and your child to join the urban guerrilla? You don't do it. You don't wake up in the morning. It's not like Jesus talks to you in your ear. There are no miracles. It's a decision that one makes after much studying, much reading, doing research in historical documents about other Latin American countries and the Vietnam struggle and the Black liberation struggle. How do we find freedom? And there isn't a nation in the world that has not won its freedom without fighting for it. I think people have to understand that liberation struggles require acts of war. And the United States is at war with the Puerto Rican nation. And they try to cover their eyes up by offering things that they never provide us with. And with colonialization, you get a psychological platform of abuse where a confusion occurs in people's mind. We live in 2 worlds. We want this, but we want that. And we have a trajectory of freedom fighters in our history. So whenever you get scared of wanting to be part of a freedom movement, read some books, learn from the past, and be prepared to make some sacrifices. Because no one is ever free without making sacrifice. Those of us that made a choice to be part of the armed struggle, well, we learned from the man. The United States has done war all over the world. Thousands of lives have been lost. And it wasn't to have a war, it was to have a political impact of something that could open people's minds and action. That people would say, wow, contra, that's happening. And I think young people today, it's difficult because now you have all these, and now we have artificial intelligence. They can take my voice and change it and say whatever they want. But that won't happen. But I think young people need to move away from wanting to be an influencer. How about creating TikTok actions of solidarity with each other? How about creating concerts of music that's going to bring us together to be willing to fight for what you want? How about using your cameras? When I did television, we didn't have cell phones. We used to use film. I mean, I know that. Film. Cameras weighed 30, 40 pounds and cost over $40,000. You guys, most of your parents buy you a $1,500 cells. Use it to create change. Use it to show the reality because there are still poor people everywhere people of color live. Everywhere. There's no place in America or in Puerto Rico that everybody lives in this enchanted island. No, we don't. And in the United States of America, there are still communities, people have death row in Los Angeles. You have people are being devastated all over, their drugs all over the place. Find an alternative to yourselves to create. Use your music to create change. Learn to dance to create change. Learn to be committed to change. And you can do it if you really want it. But I think the best joy of life is to see a sister that you did time with and tell you changed my life because you made me learn to do change in myself. Honor yourself by knowing who you are, where you come from. And let's talk about your ancestors, but find out who they really are and why they struggled and what they are about. You got it. You got Google, Joogle. Yeah, Google it. It's easy. Learn your essence. And then you can struggle and really win. Because then you know what you're fighting for. Yeah, now everybody wants to do both, but do it. Learn to dance. Learn to move your body. Learn to honor yourselves as people, men and women of color, as revolutionaries, as freedom fighters, as caciques in struggle. That's what we need to do. Puerto Rico Libre, free Palestine, and please keep fighting to bring our political prisoners home.
Luz, progreso, libertad y paz siempre, justicia y paz. Para Dylcia, fuerza para su familia, amor y paz y consuelo para su familia. My condolences and my love to all those in this archipelago and in our diaspora grieving the loss of Dylcia Pagán Rivera, especially her son Ernesto, her granddaughters, her dog Doa. A special extension of my love to her comrades, to all those of us blessed with an opportunity to be in her presence to share our journeys with her as her mentees, as her friends. I hope that these words of hers can serve as a balm, as guides, as we continue on this decolonial journey forward as Boricuas. Dylcia's family is collecting funds to support with her funeral expenses. Si están escuchando de Puerto Rico o tienen acceso a cuentas bancarias en Puerto Rico, pueden hacer un donativo por ATH móvil. El número es 939-439-7166. So if you are, or in Puerto Rico, have access to a bank account here, or folks here, donations could be made through ATH móvil to the number 939-439-7166. 939-439-7166. Se pide, por favor, identificar el nombre de Dylcia Pagán en las notas. All right, so make sure to make your donation with a note that includes Dylcia Pagán's name. You can also make a donation to PayPal at Ernesto Gómez Gómez, Dylcia's son, ERNESTO, Ernesto Gómez Gómez. If you are listening to this in the future, still consider sending a little something, something. And I would say to Ernesto Gómez Gómez via PayPal, because as the documentary shows, and if you haven't seen the documentary, The Double Life of Ernesto Gómez Gómez, released in 1999, aired in the States via PBS. And you know the long struggle that this brother has had in his life, being raised by another family in Mexico. And also, Ernesto is the father to Dylcia's two beautiful granddaughters that she names in this conversation. And so it would be a wonderful way to support Dylcia's legacy via her family. Whenever you hear this, if you are moved by Dylcia's story, then consider contributing. Also, you can look up our different political prisoners. Leonard Peltier, who has been in prison virtually my entire life, and support other campaigns for the release of political prisoners and prisoners of war who continue. We speak so much about the civil rights movements, about all of these freedom fighters that did much to support us. We have Mumia Abu Jamal, which Dylcia also names folks that can use our support. Let's not wait till someone passes to honor their struggle, to honor their sacrifices, to honor their lives, their legacies. En vida. Thank you again for listening in to another episode of the Rematriating Boriken podcast. You could find new episodes posted around every new and full moons. You could find more information at Rematriating Boriken, BORIKEN.com. I am Yasmin Hernandez, ever grateful to my mentors, to the teachers of the struggle, to the keepers of our ancestral Boricua essence, and to our ancestors, especially our newest ancestor, Dylcia Pagán.